statement you just said, you said there's life after death. So go into that. Life after death.
Well, in Sikhism, basically, there are a lot of different realms that you could pass through based on your own karma and your own good deeds as well. So you could pass through a period of time where you're just a soul traveling the world and doing different things, and then at some point your soul can also accept a body if it's the Creator's will, and then have another life and another opportunity to basically do those things for which our soul has been called to do, in direct relation to the divine. And then after a certain point, your spiritual state elevates to a higher level where you're able to be in a permanent realm of God consciousness, and then your necessity to have another life will be no longer valid. You'll be basically liberated. And so the goal of life is basically to have a permanent connection with God. And a perfect example of that is we meditate, we have a connection with God, and then of course when that meditation is up, we meet the material world again, Maya we call it, and then that separation is present again, and then we got to connect back up. And so, but through these more powerful connections, we begin to have longer periods of time where we're actually connected to God. So that's you can experience that here on Earth. You don't have to imagine that there's something different at the other side, and have faith on that. No, have faith on your direct experience right here, right now. That's the key. In a nutshell, on that topic.
A lot of information right there.
Yeah.
What's basically a woman's role in Sikhism?
Well, basically, the woman's role is not defined. Man's role and women's role is not really defined in great detail, and if and then there's culture. When we look at Sikh culture, it differs greatly from individual to individual. So, like if you were to go to Punjab, let's say, you'd be like, oh man, women's role is really low, man. They don't have opportunities, they're not educated in the same way that men are. Well, our scripture doesn't encourage us to look for examples in the world, right? We were encouraged to look at examples, as we experience deeper and deeper truths, okay? And basically, if you look at each person beyond our body aspects, right? Who are we? Are we guys? I mean, are we really guys? If we go to the deepest level, are women really women on the deepest level? When we go beyond the emotional, beyond the mental faculties, and we go deeper and deeper into our true identity, the obvious answer is no. We're not that identity. We're not a gender. So. And I think the role of gender is always changing. It's always updating itself. So I think that's why our gurus didn't really spell it out. Oh, women should be doing this and men should be doing this. There's really room to develop and be who you want to be. And that's what I respect so much about Sikhi is there's not this push that you have to be this, you have to be that. There's a lot of questioning, that goes on in Sikh, you know, and I love that, you know.
Right. Okay. Next question.
Okay.
Is there a creation story?
Yes. My interpretation of the creation story is basically that God was meditating in his own enlightened state of consciousness, you know, and there was no planets at the time, no stars, you know, there was just darkness and the presence of his own personal state. And there was no thoughts going in his mind. God isn't a him or her, but I'll say that because of the limitations of the English language. So God, in his state of supreme, you know, consciousness, basically had this thought that there should be a reflection of himself, you know, and so in that thought, all of creation, you know, gave birth, and then you know, he could have created an impersonal world. He could where there really wasn't much reflection of his own identity taking place, but because of his supreme state of love, he actually split himself into particles, and in those particles, you know, is our soul, and all of matter that we see, you know. So and then so from that creation story is actually our own story, which is basically that, you know, from these particles that have been separated from the divine supreme consciousness, we have to find our way back, you know. And so that's where all of our stories begin to form, you know.
Gotcha.
Yeah.
Gotcha. Very interesting. Very interesting. Okay. Next question. How does one become a Sikh?
Well, basically, one cannot become a Sikh. It's not a matter of converting. It's not a matter of going from one thing to another, but a matter of just recognizing, you know, the truth. You know, that's already in here. I mean, we have all the recipe to begin to accept and acknowledge the truth, right? So it's more of that than going from being like, okay, the color red to the color blue, you know. You know, if so, one basically has to realize, you know, who God is and how to basically walk the path toward the truth and find our way back. I mean, so that's the mystical answer to your question, and the sort of the religious answer to the question would be that you take Amrit, which is like a baptism. And in that baptismal process, you basically recognize that there was 10 gurus that brought about, you know, lots of different truths in a time where falsehood was prevalent in all religions and, you know, walks of life, and basically acknowledge that the scripture is your prophet, your personal guru, like you know what I mean? It is basically your guide to get you back to God, and you know. So then let's see. So yeah, you take Amrit, and then you basically give up your head to God. You say, hey man, my mind is limited, you know, it creates all these problems, you know, I'm gonna just give it over to a higher power, right? Instead of following it, right? Because right now our heads are guru. We're following this mind, and so at a certain point we have to recognize, wait a minute, you know, let's utilize it properly, you know? So so basically say, you know, my mind is yours now. And now I'm, this life that I thought was there is not there, you know, like in the way that I thought it was, right? You know?
Right.
So there's this concept of being dead while alive, right? So when we're not connected to God, we're basically dead. And we're dead, but we think we're alive, right? We're like, oh, my heart's beating, you know, I'm alive, right? You know, but then at a certain point, you bump heads, you know, or you like hit a wall where you're like, dang, this lifestyle's not leading anywhere, right? And then you realize, okay, I'm not really alive without this God experience being the center of my life. I'm just, right? So when you become alive, you're like, all right. So you have to basically kill yourself to get to be alive in the heavenly sense.
Wow.
You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Yeah, so in that Amrit process, you basically spiritually cut your head off and be like, bing, and then after that, receiving the Amrit, life's changed. Now you become more awake. So that's how you become a Sikh in a religious sense.
Well, so can I get this passage?
Go for it, brother.
Yes, this passage here in the Bible that matches exactly what he just said about living while you're still dead. This is 1 Timothy 5:6, and it reads, "But she who lives in pleasure is dead while she liveth." You know, and he just said, basically when you're feeding, you know, you're kind of your lower self, you know what I'm saying, and not feeding the higher power, you know, you're dead while you still live. And he said basically cut off your head, and for me, how I interpret that is basically, you know, cutting off your flesh, you know, basically, and that kind of coincides with the Bible. That's why I was telling you on the phone yesterday. There's a lot of comparisons, you know, with a lot of stuff that's in the Bible, and you know, with the religion that is Sikhism. So that was very interesting what you just said. Like, it's very connecting. Like, I'm gonna get to another precept part of the passage a little later. But next question: what is the difference between Sikhism and Hinduism?
Well, Hinduism is older. It's basically, it's got a lot of similarities, but with Hinduism, there's a lot of added traditions that are actually just more worldly than not. I mean, I'll give you an example. The caste system, where the lowest caste, you know, they don't even touch them. They like stay away from them, you know, because they think that they have some sort of spiritual disease of some sort, and they cannot progress further in life, you know. And then as they're treated like lower class citizens, they begin to, next life, they climb up the Varna system, you know, to higher levels, you know. But the reality is, it's totally worldly, you know. I mean, how are you going to put somebody lower? I mean, you know, it's a matter of that, you know. I think God really sees us in different terms. You know, see the tribe we come from, or the body. He sees your passionate desire to be with them. I mean, that's above all this other stuff, right? Mm-hmm. So even though Hinduism has that in some of the scriptures, it's like it's got this other stuff that really conflicts and contradicts that, you know. So, and then the Sakti, which is just totally awful. It's like when the husband dies, you know, they cremate him, right? Well, they just put the wife on the cremation pit, and then she just burns alive. I mean, you know, like, because they think that once you're married, that's it. But if the wife dies, he's not put on the cremation fire pit. he just gets another wife. So he has unlimited amounts of opportunity to remarry. You know, so come on, how cheap is that? You know, so even though Guru Nanak was born in a Hindu family. He's the first guru of our faith, and so he, from the beginning, rejected so many aspects of his own family religion of origin, you know, and but he kept those true aspects, you know, within our faith as well. So one could say that, oh, well, isn't Sikhism just a reformation of Hinduism? You know, and then other people say, well, it's just a mixture of Islam and Hinduism. But the reality is that truth is universal. And that you can, like you did with the Bible, you can pull that and then put it right next to our scripture, and pretty much goes together.
There are a lot of parallels,
you know?
between all the religions. Yeah.
It goes it's just that it's expressed a little bit different, you know, as it should be, you know. So basically, we don't feel it's a reformation of Hinduism. It's just the truth. It's the universal perspective, you know.
Gotcha. Okay, is there a special diet in Sikhism?
Yes. Basically, there's so many scriptural verses that promote vegetarianism. So that is basically the diet that we should be, you know, working towards. But there's allowance. I mean, you know, God doesn't want us to die if we're going across a desert and we're hungry. I mean, I don't think that He would want us to starve, right? So I mean, obviously, meat would be the thing that we would have to go toward. So, you know, because God's not irrational, right?
Right. This has been the second interview with Harpreet, I believe the brother's name. And this is Priest Zohar. Thank you again for, you know, coming once again,
brother. It's been a pleasure. It really has.
I hope people got edified, because people loved the first interview. That's why I had to do part two. You know, people were very interested and tuned with it. And this is actually the first time and first video actually on YouTube of an Israelite, Hebrew Israelite, and a Sikh, you know, working side by side. So, you know, that's an accomplishment within itself.
That's awesome.
Shalom to all my Muslims, shalom to the Israelites, shalom to my Moors, peace to the Sikhs, peace to the brothers of Hinduism, and those who scattered in all these different kinds of religions are Buddhists. And it's up to, you know, all of us in this world to make it a better place. And as we see, we do have a big, you know, a heavy amount of corruption, especially here in America. But it's up to us to change the narrative. And you know, any final thoughts on that? You know?
Yeah, I just want everybody to take some time after they see this video and just spend some time, you know, meditating or just reflecting on your life. And it's not a matter that you be one faith or another, but to just give yourself that time and attention to meditate on these thoughts. And
T-Desco, the producer.
basically, and I don't know if contact information is necessary, but I definitely want to.
I mean, if you want to get it out, you know.
If everybody can find me on Facebook, it's gonna be Harpreet Singh Baltimore. So HARPREET space SINGH, and then if you type in Baltimore, it should show up. I'm on a scooter during the Freddie Gray protests. And then just friend me and have a dialogue. Send me a message, no problem.
And if you want to get in contact with me, you're Zohar. That's YAZAR Adara H-D-A-R-A-T-H, and that means basically God is my crown and mantle, That's very important. That's the Hebrew, and it's special. Just like these 12 tribes right here represented. These are stones. You gotta have pressure on them, and this represents every Israelite around the world, because we have to be pressured into made, to our finest, production, because we've been out of our heritage for so long. We're going to put pressure on our people, to get them in the right place. And it takes time, takes sincerity, but with faith in God and taking it step by step, we can get all things accomplished. Once again, this has been your